French ER verbs comprise of 90% of all French verbs, and this video will give you a full crash course in under 10 minutes. French verbs are pretty easy to master because they build off of one another, so you'll be an expert before you know it. Alright, let's get to conjugating. First things first, we conjugate in 6 different personal subject pronouns, and these represent the subject in each sentence. First person singular is je, which means I. Second person singular is tu, which is you. Third person singular is represented by il, elle, and on. Il means he, elle is she, and on is a general subject that means one. You'll also hear this more frequently used in informal contexts to mean we. First person plural is represented by nous, which means we. Second person plural is vous, which means you, as in you all, you guys, used with groups of people, but it can also be second person singular in the formal context, so using vous with the elderly or your professors. This isn't something that really exists in English, so it takes some time to get used to, and you'll understand more with context who you should address with vous and who you should address with tu. Finally, third person plural is represented by il and elle, and these sound the same as the singular version, they just have an s at the end. And if you're referring to groups of people with mixed genders, then you would use il. Both of these mean they. Now let's look at the conjugations for present tense, imperative, conditionnel, or the conditional, subjunctive, and imperfect. The French present tense is used to express generally accepted knowledge, things that will immediately occur, present actions, and habitual actions. To create your stem, take your ER verb and drop the ER. So aimer becomes aime. Then you add the following endings. J'aime, with an E at the end. Tu aimes, es. Il, elle, on, aime, with an E. Nous aimons, ons. Vous aimez, easy. Il, elle, aime, ent. If you want to add a thought after the verb, like I like to dance, you would simply add the infinitive of the next verb. J'aime danser. Take note also that if a verb starts with a vowel, like aimer, énerver, inviter, you will drop the E on the je and just put J apostrophe and then the conjugation of the verb. So it's not je aime, it's j'aime. L'impératif, or the imperative. The French imperative is used to give commands, and you only use this with the tu, nous, and vous form. Think about it, you can't really give yourself commands, so it's really quite simple. All you do is conjugate it the same way you would in present tense, and the only difference is that in the tu form, you drop the s at the end. I don't know why they made that change, but it doesn't change the pronunciation. For the imperative, you don't say the subject, you simply say the verb. So for the tu form, it's aime, or aime ta planète. For nous, it's aimons, aimons notre planète. And for the vous form, aimez, aimez votre planète. One of the ways I like to practice these verb conjugations is with the FluentU platform. I know teachers will typically tell you to make these verb charts and practice them all at the same time, but I think it's more effective to type in one conjugation at a time and look up these sample videos, hear the example sentences, and really get used to hearing each conjugation in different contexts. Especially with the more advanced verb conjugations that we'll be discussing soon, it's helpful to know the trigger verbs, situations, and contexts, as well as sentence constructions that the verb can appear in. There's a link to a free trial in the description, and I highly recommend it to build your verb conjugation skills. L'imparfait, or imperfect. It's generally the past tense for repeated actions, not things that you just did once. Across the board for ER, IR, and RE verbs, you make the stem by dropping the O and S of the nous present form. So for aimer, it would be aime again. Let's take a look at the endings now. J'aimais, AIS. Tu aimais, AIS. Il, elle, aimait, AIT. Nous aimions, IONS. Vous aimiez, IEZ. And il, elle, aimait, AIENT. Le conditionnel, the conditional. The conditional is used to refer to hypothetical events, and it's also useful for making polite requests. I like to think of it as the would, could, should tense. For example, the verb aimer is especially useful for polite requests because you can use it to say I would like. I actually like the conditionnel a lot because the stem for the verb is just the infinitive of the verb itself. So aimer is just aimer. And then, remember how I said these verb tenses build off of each other? The endings for conditionnel are simply the endings that you used in imperfect. J'aimerais, AIS. Tu aimerais, AIS, il, elle, aimerait, AIT, nous aimerions, IONS, vous aimeriez, IEZ, il, elle, aimerait, AIENT. Futur simple, or the future tense. Futur simple is used to describe future events, but not anything in the very near future, like the next hour. It's kind of the same thing as saying, I will do something. You're not really sure what the time frame of the doing something is, but you know that it's going to happen in the future. It's also useful for intentions or predictions. Just like le conditionnel, the stem for this verb tense is simply the infinitive of the verb, and let's try a different verb for this example. So let's take parler. For this, you will add the endings of avoir. Je parlerai, AI, tu parleras, AS, il, elle parlera, A, nous parlerons, ONS, vous parlerez, easy, il, elle parleront, ONT. One thing to take note is that in the je form, this actually sounds the same as conditionnel. Je parlerai, you can't really tell whether it's conditionnel or futur simple. Parlerai could either be I would speak or I will speak, so this is something that you'll have to pay attention to context for. Le subjonctif or the subjunctive. Le subjonctif or the subjunctive is used to describe things that are a doubt, a judgment, or a necessity. Subjunctif is also one of those verbs that is followed by trigger verbs typically. So if you see penser, supposer, falloir, or croire, it's a pretty good indicator that you might be using le subjonctif. But like any other rule, this is just a guidance and you should pay attention to the context and the sentence to know whether you should be using subjonctif. Let's go through the conjugations. J'aime, I, tu aimes, IS, il, elle, aime, nous aimions, IONS, vous aimiez, IEZ, il, elle, aime, ENT. Don't worry if you're having a little bit of trouble knowing when to use this verb tense. It's typically the most difficult for learners, so if you want a little bit more practice and a detailed breakdown of how to use this verb tense, as well as the others we discussed, check out the free PDF linked below that gives you a detailed breakdown of the verb tenses. And to practice hearing some of these verb tenses, check out our deep dive into the song Je veux by Zaz.